The slap echoed across Buckingham Palace courtyard like a gunshot. For 6 years, Sergeant James Harrington had been the only black royal guard to never break position, not once. But when the blonde woman's hand struck his face and she screamed, "Go back where you came from," something changed in those 2.3 seconds that would cost him everything he'd worked for and save a child he'd never met. Before we witness how one moment of courage changed 2 lives forever, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because sometimes the most powerful stories come from the most unexpected places. Now, let's see what happens when duty collides with humanity. The morning had started like any other. James stood at his post, rifle perfectly aligned, eyes fixed on the invisible horizon that every royal guard learns to see. At 32, he was the youngest guard to earn 3 commendation medals, though tourists photographing him never knew about his Distinguished Service Cross from Afghanistan or the night he'd saved 4 civilians from a bombing in Helmand Province. What they saw was simpler: a black man in the Queen's uniform. For some, it was inspiring. For others, like the woman now pushing through the crowd with her nephew in a wheelchair, it was an affront to their vision of Britain. "Stay here, Daniel," she commanded the boy, parking his wheelchair roughly against the palace fence. The child, no more than 7, clutched a toy soldier with trembling hands. His legs, thin beneath a Manchester United blanket, hadn't moved in 2 years, not since the accident that had also taken his parents. James noticed the boy immediately. It was part of his training to observe everything while appearing to see nothing. The child's eyes, bright with intelligence despite the dark circles beneath them, watched his aunt with a mixture of fear and resignation that made James's chest tighten behind his scarlet tunic. The woman, Margaret Whitmore, carried herself with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Her designer handbag swung like a weapon as she shouldered past Japanese tourists, her voice cutting through the morning air. "Look at this," she announced to no one in particular, gesturing at James. "This is what's wrong with our country. They'll let anyone play dress-up now." A German family quickly ushered their children away. An elderly Sikh gentleman in a turban shook his head but said nothing. The crowd, sensing trouble, began to form a nervous semicircle. James had heard it all before. In 6 years, he'd cataloged every slur, every joke, every supposedly whispered comment about diversity quotas and political correctness. His supervisor, Major Timothy Hall, had told him on his first day, "They'll test you, Harrington. Not because of the uniform, but because of who's wearing it. Your strength will be in never giving them the reaction they want." But Margaret Whitmore wasn't satisfied with mere words. "He probably can't even understand proper English," she continued, stepping closer. The space between them, that sacred buffer every tourist knew not to cross, shrank to nothing. "Hey, I'm talking about you!" From his wheelchair, Daniel watched with growing alarm. "Aunt Maggie, please!" "Quiet," she snapped without looking back. "This is important. People need to see what's happening to our traditions." That's when James noticed something crucial. Daniel's hands weren't trembling from fear alone. The boy was trying to move his legs, subtle shifts beneath the blanket as if preparing for something. The medical bracelet on his thin wrist read PTSD, selective mutism, partial paralysis. Margaret had now crossed the rope barrier. Security would intervene soon, but she seemed intoxicated by her own performance. The phones were out, recording everything. Someone live-streamed on Instagram. The digital age had turned every moment into potential evidence. "You know what?" Margaret's voice rose to a screech. "I pay taxes for this circus. I deserve a response." She raised her hand. Time dilated. James saw it coming. The theatrical wind-up, the camera's recording, the calculated provocation. He could have shifted slightly, let it miss. Instead, he held position. The slap connected with a crack that silenced 40 conversations. "Go back where you came from!" she shrieked. In the 2.3 seconds that followed, James processed several facts. 37 phones had captured the assault. Security was 15 seconds away. The woman was already claiming victory. The boy in the wheelchair had started crying. It was the 4th fact that made him move. Breaking 6 years of perfect discipline, James stepped forward. His movement was precise, controlled, not the lunge of anger, but the deliberate action of a soldier. He caught Margaret's wrist as she prepared for a second slap, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded men under fire. "Madam, step back, now!" The crowd exploded. Gasps, cheers, more phones emerging. Margaret's face transformed from triumph to calculated victimhood in milliseconds. Help! He's attacking me! This savage is— Stop! The voice that interrupted her was small but clear. Daniel had pushed his wheelchair forward, tears streaming down his face. Stop lying! Margaret whirled on him. I told you to be quiet! No! Daniel's hands gripped his wheels with surprising strength. You always lie, just like you lied about Mom and Dad. The crowd fell silent. Even the traffic seemed to pause. James released Margaret's wrist, his training reasserting itself, but the damage was done. Major Hall was already striding across the courtyard, his face thunderous. Sergeant Harrington, stand down. Sir, Not another word. Report to my office immediately. Hall's eyes swept the scene. The phones, the crying child, the woman already launching into her victim narrative. Someone call the police, and someone please attend to that boy. As James walked away, each step feeling like a small death, he heard Daniel's voice rise again. He didn't do anything wrong. She hit him. I'll tell everyone what really happened. The next hour was the longest of James's life. Stripped of his bearskin cap and ceremonial uniform, he sat in Major Hall's office wearing only his undertunic, feeling more naked than he'd ever been in combat. Through the window he could see Margaret Whitmore performing for the cameras, her story growing more elaborate with each telling. 6 years, Major Hall said finally. 6 bloody years without a single infraction. Sir, the child is not your concern. Your duty was to your post. Hall's voice softened slightly. James, I understand. God knows I understand. But understanding doesn't change protocol. You physically engaged with a civilian. She assaulted me first, sir. On camera, from multiple angles. Yes, I'm aware. Hall rubbed his temples. But you responded. That's all the media will care about. Royal Guard grabs tourist. Can you imagine the headlines? A knock interrupted them. Hall's secretary entered, her face pale. Sir, there's a situation developing outside. The boy, the one in the wheelchair, he's refusing to leave until he speaks to someone in charge. The crowd won't let security move him. And sir, the videos are already viral. Hall pulled up his tablet. The footage was everywhere. Royal Guard assaulted. Dash justice for James. Racist Karen. But one video stood out. Daniel, speaking directly to someone's camera, his young voice fierce with conviction. My name is Daniel Whitmore. That lady is my aunt. She's supposed to take care of me since my parents died, but she's mean. She says horrible things about people who look different. The guard didn't do anything wrong. He protected me. He's a hero. Hall set down the tablet. Christ. James felt something shift in his chest. Sir, permission to? Denied. You're suspended pending investigation. Hall stood. But perhaps I should speak to the boy myself. Get his formal statement. You're dismissed, Sergeant. James walked out in civilian clothes, his career in ruins, his perfect record shattered. He'd almost reached the palace gates when a small voice called out, Sir! Guard, sir! Daniel had somehow maneuvered his wheelchair away from the crowd. A police officer trailed behind him, looking helpless. The boy's face was blotchy from crying, but his eyes burned with determination. You're not supposed to be here, James said gently. Neither are you. Daniel's observation was surprisingly astute. They fired you, didn't they? Because of her? It's complicated. No, it's not. Daniel's hands tightened on his wheels. She's a bully. Like the ones who pushed me down the stairs at school. Like the ones who said I deserved it because my dad was Polish. James knelt beside the wheelchair, abandoning protocol entirely now. Is that how you ended up? The doctors say I might walk again, if I try hard enough. If I believe. Daniel's voice dropped. But Aunt Maggie says I'm being punished, that God doesn't like mixed families. The words hit James like shrapnel. He thought of his own childhood, the names he'd been called, the fights he'd learned not to start. Daniel, listen to me. What happened to you wasn't punishment, and what your aunt says is wrong, I know. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out his toy soldier. This was my dad's. He collected them, said they represented bravery. He held it out to James. You're brave, even if they don't see it. Mr. Harrington? A new voice interrupted. A woman in a suit approached, badge visible. Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison, I'm going to need to ask you some questions, but first, she glanced at Daniel. We've been reviewing the footage, all of it, including some from before the incident. She held up a tablet showing security footage from 20 minutes before the slap. Margaret Whitmore, clearly visible, instructing Daniel to watch and learn how to deal with people who don't belong. She planned it, Morrison continued. We've also discovered she's part of an extremist group that targets minority service members. You're the fourth guard she's provoked this month, but the first to respond. James felt the world tilt. The others? Didn't break position, but also didn't have a child's welfare to consider. Morrison smiled slightly. Major Hall has requested I expedite my investigation, something about new evidence and public interest. Over the next 3 hours, the story exploded across social media. Daniel the hero trended worldwide. Videos of his testimony spread faster than Margaret's victim narrative. Palace visitors who'd witnessed previous incidents came forward. By evening, the narrative had completely shifted. But the most powerful moment came when a video surfaced of James kneeling beside Daniel after the incident, away from the cameras. Someone had filmed them from a distance as James helped Daniel with breathing exercises for his panic attack, the same techniques he'd learned for combat PTSD. See, Daniel said in the video, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear silly hats. Major Hall called James that evening. Report to duty tomorrow, 800 hours, full uniform. Sir? The palace has reviewed the footage, all of it. Your response was unorthodox. But given the child's welfare was at stake and evidence of premeditation, they're calling it protective intervention. There will be additional training on de-escalation, but James, you kept your oath to protect and serve. Sometimes that means protecting values, not just venues. What about Daniel? Social services are involved. His aunt is facing charges, but the boy insisted on one thing. He wants to see you back at your post, said he has something to prove. The next morning, James stood at his position, bearskin cap tall, rifle precise. The crowd was larger than usual, filled with supporters who'd followed the story. But James's eyes were fixed ahead, professional despite everything. Then he heard it, the sound of wheels on cobblestones. Not smooth rolling, but irregular, stuttering progress. He couldn't look, couldn't break position again, but he could hear the crowd's gasps. Daniel appeared in his peripheral vision. The boy wasn't in his wheelchair. He was behind it, using it as a walker, taking painful, impossible steps. Each movement was agony, but his face blazed with determination. You showed me, Daniel called out, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. You showed me that standing up isn't about legs. It's about courage. He made it 3 more steps before his legs gave out. Multiple hands reached to catch him. Tourists, guards on break, even Major Hall who'd emerged to watch. As they helped Daniel back into his chair, the courtyard erupted in applause. James couldn't move, couldn't acknowledge the moment. But a single tear traced down his dark cheek, hidden beneath the shadow of his bearskin cap. Later, during the changing of the guard, as James marched off duty, he passed Daniel's wheelchair. Without breaking stride, he executed a perfect eyes right, an honor reserved for royalty and fallen comrades. Daniel saluted back with his toy soldier, his smile bright enough to light the kingdom. 6 months later, at a ceremony for the Queen's birthday honors, 2 names were called that surprised no one who'd followed their story. Sergeant James Harrington received the Queen's Commendation for valuable service. Daniel Whitmore, the youngest recipient in history, received the British Empire Medal for his courage in exposing extremism. They stood together, James tall and proud, Daniel on new leg braces, but standing on his own power. The Queen herself paused during the ceremony, leaning down to Daniel. I hear you're quite the advocate for our guards, she said. They protect us, Daniel replied simply. Someone should protect them too. As flashbulbs popped and history was made, James thought about that morning 6 months ago. He'd broken 6 years of perfect stillness for 2.3 seconds. He'd risked everything, lost it all, and somehow gained so much more. Because sometimes the greatest act of duty is knowing when tradition must yield to humanity. Sometimes protecting the crown means protecting its smallest subjects, and sometimes a child's courage can remind a soldier why he first put on the uniform. Margaret Whitmore was sentenced to 18 months for assault and conspiracy. She served 6 before early release, disappearing into obscurity. But Daniel's words echoed long after. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear silly hats. And sometimes they know exactly when to take them off. The toy soldier now sits in a case in James's flat next to his medals. A reminder that courage comes in all sizes, and that the smallest voices often speak the loudest truths. Daniel walks unassisted now, though he still struggles. He visits James every week at the palace, where they share a silent understanding. Two warriors who found each other in the most unlikely moment, proving that sometimes breaking protocol doesn't break honor. It reveals it. What would you have done in James's position? Would you have maintained your position or protected the child? This true story reminds us that real courage isn't always about following rules. It's about knowing when humanity matters more than protocol. If Daniel's bravery inspired you, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that heroes come in all forms. Like this video if you believe in standing up for what's right, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of royal guards who prove that true strength sometimes means breaking tradition to uphold values. Hit that notification bell to join our community of over 500,000 viewers who believe in the power of human dignity. Drop a comment below sharing a time when you witnessed someone stand up against injustice. We read every single one and feature the best stories in our community posts. Remember, you don't need a uniform to be a guardian of what's right. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to speak truth when others choose silence. See you next week with another powerful story from the gates of Buckingham Palace, where every day ordinary people do extraordinary things.